Independent music, the triangle of musicians, fans and music professionals. This is Tim from the Indie Bands blog, and welcome once again. Who's on today? Let's go find out. Welcome to Independent Music, Indie Music Tips number 10. We've got to double figures. This time I'm with Thaddeus Moore of Liquid Mastering, a couple of other business names there that we'll have a chat about. And he's going to be talking about mastering your music. Hi, Thaddeus.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for sparing me the time. Now, you're a guy who's been in the industry for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, I've kind of been here a while, and it's something I still wake up and think about every day, so I'm glad to be here.
You started off, as I understand it, more on the mixing side, and as time has developed, you've got more and more involved and interested in mastering, and that's really where you're specializing now. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I've started out as a recording engineer, working at a bunch of different studios, and then eventually started my own, and have been recording and mixing for people for nearly 16 years, and for the last, 8 to 10 years, I've been getting asked to do more and more mastering jobs. And 2 years ago, I decided to finally just make it official and set up a mastering business called Liquid Mastering that was available to anybody worldwide who is, either working out of their own home studio or in another professional studio and wants a third pair of ears on it. So that's how that came about.
We'll come back to your business end towards the end of this chat, if we could do. But one thing I would like to throw in right at the start is that Thaddeus has very kindly offered to master one band's one track for one band on a sort of competition that we'll run. What will they need to get across to you, Thaddeus, or what will I need to get across to you? Because I might be the one monitoring it. I'll give the details of the competition towards the end. But in essence, what do they need to be getting over to get something mastered?
As in file type, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things that a lot of people are doing at home is recording in different formats. There's so many different DAW systems now, it's hard to even pinpoint what each person is doing, and really it doesn't matter. As long as you're getting a sound that you like, that's the most important thing. But if you can be recording at 24-bit at 44.1 kilohertz or higher, that's better. You're going to be getting a far better quality out of your system at 24 bits than at 16, say. And I hope that most people know that, but if you don't, please look it up. Look up the difference, because you're going to have so much more resolution and be able to record much softer sounds with less digital distortion and all the stuff that comes along with that at 24 bits. And a lot of systems out there now are coming with the ability to go up to 96 kilohertz as a recording. I recommend against 96 kilohertz if you're doing music. It's one of the things that 48 kilohertz had become the broadcast standard back in the early 90s. So 48K, if you ever see that, that is specifically for film and video and things like that, and that's the universal standard for that. And double 48 is 96, and that's still the video standard. So if you're working in the music world and your output is going to go to a CD or an MP3, however you're going to export it, you should be working at 44.1 or 88.2 is what I'd recommend. If you're going to be working at a higher sample rate, work at 88.2. And mastering engineers like me love getting higher quality files because there's more we can do with it. And one of the most important things to do is make sure that you're not compressing and then re-up sampling later. If you go down to 16-bit and then you convert that file that you've created up to 24 bits, you're not gaining anything. What you need to do is make sure that your native resolution is 24-bit as you're putting out your final mix. And just whatever sample rate you're working at is fine. I'm happy to do whatever conversion needs to happen, but I just highly recommend 44.1 or 88.2. That's
okay. One thing that is available to a lot of people now are these home mixing kits, and one of the I'm ancient, so I still remember the 4-channel analog recordings. But they seem to now have a multitude, in fact, an infinite number of channels that people can record on. That must make everybody's life more difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to be that kind of a nerd, if you want to get that deep into it, I'll back you up. I'll support your effort. But honestly, like, most of the best records that have ever been made have been made with 24 tracks or less. So just think about that in the way that you're working. If you are having trouble committing to something, if you have 4 takes of a freaking guitar solo, make a commitment to one of them and delete the other 3. I mean, just
right.
As you go along in your music production, if you can commit to something and just stand by it for the rest of the time, it'll make your life a lot easier, because what ends up happening with these, millions of tracks is that people are wandering around lost in this world of, like, I don't know which of these is better, and, that's the main problem I have with it. I mean, the amount of tracks is pretty much irrelevant now, because computers have gotten fast enough where somebody can go out and buy, like, a little tiny MacBook or whatever and have as many tracks possible for them to do whatever they want. But
yeah.
I say this all the time to all sorts of different people, my students, my clients. Keep it simple for yourself. If you're a musician, you shouldn't have to spend 30,000 hours learning some software to be able to record yourself. You want to just be able to hit a button and record it down and get your music the way that you want. I would rather musicians spent more time on the music than on the recording side of things. And it started to shift where people are pulling out their hair because they don't really understand all the software, all the ins and outs, and all the craziness that you can get into with them. And it's seriously reducing the quality of the music, because instead of just playing what they love to play, they're worried about learning all this software crap that really, I mean, leave that up to somebody else. Get your music down the way that you want.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other interesting things that you talked about, which is certainly something that I agree with 100%, is that you said by this tendency to go for multi channels, the music itself actually loses some of its quality, in that you haven't got the spacing, you haven't got the old stuff that you actually, when you go back and listen to what you deem to be a great track, it's got a different texture to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a density issue too, because with the ability to layer more and more stuff, you just get to a point where the arrangement of the song falls apart. It no longer has the emotive quality that you originally intended, because now you have 37 takes of a guitar or whatever it is, overlapping all these different sections. And I mean, you can go nuts. I mean, look at all the great classical composers, that, like, when they had all of this stuff at their disposal, their symphonies got more and more dense and more complicated, until at one point they just decided to throw it all away and go back to simplicity. And I mean, It's the same thing that we're dealing with now with technology. People are getting to that point where their arrangements just suck. They're like, this isn't what I wanted to have down. And one of the production elements that a lot of artists that, have a decent budget to come into a studio and work with, one of the modalities is to try to track everything in the universe. Just track as many things as you possibly can, throw down as many ideas, but then be very stern about what you cut. Lose things that aren't serving the song that you're trying to do. And that's fine too. So I don't want to be opinionated and say that, too many tracks is a bad thing. It's just you need to be very decisive about what fits the song and what just needs to get deleted. And once you make that commitment, you'll be a happier person, I promise.
And you probably have twice as much time on your hands as well.
Yeah, totally. You'll be able to go out, have some tea with your friends, like, you're not in the room, like, going, it's so much better to just commit yourself.
One of the things that people are sort of nervous of as a creator is that they've created this thing that they really like, that's taken their heart and soul and given them sleepless nights forever whilst they were trying to get the whole thing together, and then they hand it over to this music professional. Is there a danger that you can just sort of reinterpret what it was that they wanted to produce and go, oh no, I want to put my mark on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that you'll hear a lot of nightmare stories about people I have a client that I worked with for years that I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but they went to this producer that had done some work that they really liked and gave them all these files and gave them 10,000 US, to make these songs whatever they needed to be in his world or whatever. They got them back, and they were literally on my couch crying. They were like, I can't believe this is so terrible. This is not what we wanted at all. So whenever you hand over your work to somebody else, there is a fear that they're going to distort what your original vision was. But the more communication you can have up front with somebody, the better that outcome is going to be. And, when you get to the point of mastering, like what my main thing is, I'm not making creative decisions most of the time. I'm not making any, part decisions. When the files come to a mastering engineer, the mix is done, or at least it's, 99% done. I might send some ideas back and say, hey, there's this one section of the song that I feel like this one instrument is a little bit too out front, or I can't hear enough of it, and I think the melody is beautiful, or whatever, and have them remix that one part and give it back to me. But most of the time, I don't have to make any creative decisions. Mastering is a very different thing than mixing and recording and producing. Mastering is just looking at the whole picture and saying, what is going to make this song come across on a multitude of different output formats, through somebody's laptop speakers, crappy little earbuds, good headphones, giant speakers in a big hall. The mastering engineer is trying to think about all those things and figure out what frequency content there's too much or too little of and balance things out. That's what mastering is, in a sense, is when you're mixing, you're dealing with instruments, you're dealing with emotionality, you're dealing with all the different parts of that song. And when you're going to mastering, you're just dealing with frequency content. You're just dealing with dynamics and frequency to make that song pop the best it possibly can out of whatever speakers it's going to come out on. So they're very different worlds, mixing and mastering.
Okay.
So,
what about mastering? You mentioned different types of speakers. What about different types of formats? Does master, if someone wants to do vinyl, or they want to do a CD, or they want to do a pure digital MP3 release, is there a different output that needs to come from you as a master? Do you need to know what it is that they're trying to release it as?
Absolutely. I always try to have that conversation up front with the artists that I work with about what their final output format is going to be. If they're going for vinyl, it needs to be a different mastering session. It actually should be a different mastering session than what goes into a digital release, either a downloadable thing they're going to post on SoundCloud or Bandcamp or whatever they're doing, or CD. The CD versus MP3 digital thing is its own mastering session versus a vinyl release, because the formats have completely different requirements. I mean, you have to make sure that the vinyl cutter is going to be able to cut the song in the way that it was intended. So there's a whole different frequency and dynamic range content thing that you got to be aware of versus digital. They're very different worlds, and I do separate sessions for the same music for both if somebody wants that. If they're just going to do a download MP3 thing, that really just needs to be one session. But if you want to release it as vinyl, please, please, please make a separate session for that specifically. So,
thanks. That's useful advice there. And the other thing that you've mentioned is all these multiples of files that you've got. I know one thing that you wanted to point out to people was how you can protect yourself from a digital recording disaster.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's one of the easiest things to do is accidentally destroy your own work. I mean, there isn't an engineer worth their salt that hasn't accidentally destroyed a file now and again. I mean, I've done it. We've all done it. And the lesson that I took away from that, and that I want to impart to the rest of the world if possible, is to back up your files. Back up your work sequentially, so that you're getting multiple versions of what you're doing along the production process, for a lot of different reasons. For one, hard drives fail every day. I mean, you hear about it all the time, and unless it's happened to you, you don't know the disaster and emotional upheaval that it causes. But it does happen. I mean, if you look at the rate at which hard drives fail, it's scary. I mean, in certain types of hard drives, which, you know, if you have a cheaper laptop, most likely you're going to have one of the cheaper designed built drives. There's sometimes 30% fail rate. I mean, 30% of those drives that get put into computers are going to fail at some point in their life. And that's, I mean, that could be anybody, you know.
And that's going to be in the middle of your creative 97-hour recording session that you've done.
Actually, in the UK, I'm not sure if most of your viewership is from that whole area, but you guys actually have a really good service. They've gone worldwide that I subscribe to, and not to, you know, pimp out somebody else's thing, but there's a website called BitCasa, BitCasa.com, that is pretty much the first online backup service that I found that's pretty reliable. So you can basically put a folder on their cloud servers, and you get an infinite hard drive. It's basically like you load an infinite hard drive into your computer, and anything you want, you just drag to it, and it copies, uploads to their server, and you have a backup in their cloud that's forever safe. And you don't even have to think about it anymore. You just stash it there, and it just lives there. I mean, it is a paid service, and, you know, whatever. You can weigh the benefits of buying your own hard drive and stashing it somewhere in a safe deposit box or up high in an attic, you know, so it doesn't get flooded if it ever floods or whatever. But, I mean, there are so many different options. But please, please, please back up your work. I mean, do it every day if you can. Have an external hard drive that's connected to your computer that you just say, okay, I'm done with that for today. I'm going to copy over all the work that I did today. If you're on a Mac, there's actually some really easy-to-use built-in software called Time Machine in the operating system that I highly recommend people use. It just makes a sequential backup every hour, every day. You can set it up to do it manually if you don't want it interrupting you. And that is an issue for people who are doing high CPU bandwidth things like lots of tracks with lots of plugins. You're probably not going to want an automatic backup solution popping up in the middle of that, eating up RAM and CPU. So you can set it up to manually do a backup, you know, at the end of your day, every day. Or you can have it be happening in the middle of the night while you're sleeping if you leave your computer on all the time. But it's one of the things that I recommend to everybody. Just make sure you're doing backups and save your songs sequentially. So as you're doing a mix or as you're doing a recording, do a song X.1, song X.2, song X.3, save as a new version in your DAW. So if you're using Logic, it'll show up as a new Logic file .1, or Digital Performer, same, or Pro Tools, or whatever it is. That way you can always go back to a previous version if something got screwy. And it's fun sometimes to, when you get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm happy with that, go back a couple of revisions and really make sure, like, oh, you know what, there was a baseline thing that I really liked that was happening there that I lost in my new mix. You know, so it's good to go back and check your own work against yourself, too.
Sure. So the advantage of a sequential backup is that you've actually got the opportunity to hear where you were. Yeah,
a week ago. It's amazing how much changes in 1 week. I mean, everybody will be shocked at how much their mix or their song has changed in 1 week if they go back to 1 week ago's version. It's remarkable.
So they've done their backups, they've got their files, and they're thinking, okay, I want to get this over to Thaddeus to get some mastering done. What do they need to prepare their material for mastering?
It's very important to make sure that your files are in a format that's universal. At this point, .wav or .aif are the standards. Either of those file types can be recognized just by basically any DAW. Their bit rate, like I was saying before, is 24-bit. Their sample rate is 44.1 or higher, and that's native. So that it hasn't been... A lot of the problems that I've had with people who don't really know what they're outputting is they'll accidentally export an MP3, like one of the programs that does a direct to iTunes bounce down, which are pretty common now. That actually compresses either AAC, which is Apple's format, or MP3, which is a little bit more of a universal format. and then they try to hand me that file to work from. And I really highly suggest everybody avoid MP3 at all in either your mix stage or sharing your music. At this point, there are plenty of lossless audio codecs out there that you can use. I mean, you can even zip compress your final audio file if you need to reduce the file size. I'm not sure people understand the difference between a lossy format and a lossless format, but everybody at this point is probably opened a zip file, right? I mean, that is a very common lossless codec, and that's not just specifically for audio. There are two very common formats out there in the world. There's FLAC, FLAC, which is free lossless audio codec. And
I think people probably be reasonably aware of that one, because that's the format that I believe, well, they used to, but I believe Bandcamp still insists that their uploads go uploads to Bandcamp are still on FLAC format, I believe.
FLAC or WAVE, yeah. They want full uncompressed or a lossless audio codec. And the difference between the .zip compression and a FLAC compression is FLAC allows the player, if you're using a certain kind of handheld device, a phone or whatever, that file type can be unencoded on playback. So you don't need to uncompress it and then play back the full quality audio. It just gets uncompressed upon playback. And Apple also has it's built into iTunes, so you just go into your advanced settings for how you import audio and choose Apple lossless audio codec, and it'll encode things. You'll have bigger file sizes, but you'll have a far better quality because you have your original quality set to work from. And that's fine if people want to give me or any mastering engineer free lossless audio codec or Apple lossless codecs. We can work with that. It's just I would recommend working in either WAVE or AIF just for all the source tracks. You can do that final compression after the mastering if you need to.
Okay. What about liquid mastering? And Thaddeus Moore, you've mentioned a couple of things on our pre-chat and a couple of things you referred to along the way. You've got the mastering business that you run. You also mentioned that you do some teaching and some training.
Locally here, I have been teaching a class for 9 years. Every term, basically, I get between probably 15 and 25 students from the local area where I live here in Eugene, Oregon, that come in, and I try to educate them on all these things about, the difference between analog and digital qualities and all the different aspects, microphones, preamps, cable types, compressors, limiters, gates, expanders, all that stuff, just as a basic overview of what they're going to encounter if they try to do this on their own. And, we live in a world where more people are making more music at home than ever before. There's more music being made every 24-hour cycle than the previous, 2 years combined or whatever. It's this exponential growth curve of people making music, which is fantastic. But a lot of people don't really know what they're doing, and honestly, they shouldn't have to. It's one of the things I always tell my students is if you are a musician and you're not a tech head, you don't want to get into all this kind of nerdy gear stuff, don't bother. Just get something that's very easy for you to get your ideas down, track your song files, and then hand it off to a professional to either mix or master if you feel like mixing it yourself. I mean, learning software is such a headache for people who don't think in those terms. It's a left brain, right brain thing. It's like you constantly having to switch back and forth just to make music, and that's not very fun. I mean, obviously the people who make electronic music, that's their whole thing. They're really into the software and geeking out in that. But for, rock bands and, folk singers and, all the different kinds of things that are happening out there with acoustic instruments, they're not necessarily going to want to learn a DAW, So it's one of those things I just tell people, let the professionals do it. You could rewire the electrical in your own house, for sure. You could put in your own plumbing, for sure. You definitely could. Those tools are out there. But if you hire an electrician or a plumber, it's going to get done in a quarter of the time, and probably you're never going to have to deal with a leak or blowing up your house from a bad wire. You see what I'm saying? It's like you hire a professional for those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Same thing with a mastering or mixing thing. I recommend it. If you're not getting the results you want, hand it to somebody else.
Sure. What about people that are listening to this that they're doing quite well, and then suddenly they've got some query and they really don't know where to turn? Is it possible for people to make contact with you and say,
Absolutely.
I've got this one particular problem?
Absolutely. I mean, I love getting into that kind of question stuff with people. I mean, every mastering engineer that is worth it talking to is going to give you feedback on what's happening. Most of the time I like having established goals in mind with people, like, we're going to work on this project, we have X amount of songs, we want to release it on vinyl, we want to release it for download, here's what we're getting, and then they send me the files, and I start doing my thing to it. And if I come across either consistent issues all across all the songs, or I think that there's instrumentation issues in a song in particular, I'll give them that feedback and let them adjust that and send me the new files, for sure. It's part of what I do. And I like having those kinds of conversations with people because it empowers them to make better work the next time. I mean, I've been doing this long enough now. I love seeing my clients, every album I get from them just gets better and better quality. It makes my job a lot easier because I have less stuff I need to try to fix, and plus I just get to sit back and go, wow, I mean, they're really on it. Like, listen to this music. It's beautiful. And that's what all of us want. It's why we're in this business. We love music. We all love just sitting back and being enveloped in that gorgeous sound that everybody's looking for. And I mean, there's no reason not to have those conversations. I mean, why would I tell somebody, no, I'm not going to give you any feedback on your mix? You know, it's like, I love those kinds of things.
So, if somebody wanted to get material over to you, how do they do that?
Well, the best way is to start a conversation with me. They can either email me through my website. I've got a really easy to use contact form on there. They can call me up if they need to. They can hit me up directly. If we're initially starting a conversation, I think I prefer email, just because there's kind of a paper trail. I can go back. If they take a few weeks in between communications, I can go back to the email they sent me last time and remember what their issues were. So email is probably the best way to start a conversation. Just go to the website, liquidmastering.com, and go to the contact form and just start giving me some background on what it is that you're trying to do. And I get queries every day from around the world. It's pretty amazing. Since I put that site up last year, I've been getting people from Greece and Morocco, and just finished an album for a guy in Croatia that was fantastic. And it's awesome how connected we all are now around the world. It's just fantastic time to be doing this. So. Yeah,
it's one of the great things of the internet. It's got its downsides. One of the great things. I mean, here are we. There are you in the USA in the morning, and here am I in the UK in the evening, and we're able to have a chat. So, you know, it's got some really great upsides, and you're giving advice to you asked the question about who listens to these. It's actually only 40%. It's about 45% of the people are actually based in the UK. The rest are international. So this might, you might get someone from Brazil make contact with you and say, can you do something? And yeah, that's a great thing about the internet.
I love that. I love Brazilian music. Let me just say that up front. It's one of the things that I play on my own time. So I'm a music head. I listen to stuff from around the world all the time. I love music. I mean, it's my life. It's what I do. Yeah.
Sure. I'll drop the links down for making contact with you at liquidmastering.com. I'll also make a note of the cloud file that you suggested, bitcasa.com, so that people can at least have a look at that one and consider it as one amongst other options. And then the other thing that you've got, which is quite neat on your website, you did tell me that there's it's not 100% true, but it's as near true as you can get, which is the ability, which I think people are not necessarily aware of, the ability to hear something pre-mastering and post-mastering. And you very kindly, I'm hoping, will be able to get me a file that we can drop onto the end of this recording, so people can just get a little bit of an idea as to what difference there is between a pre-mastered and post-mastered. But what's the little difference that's in there, which is an educational lesson for all of us who wonder about our ears sometimes?
Well, one of the things that is the drawback to the style of player that I have on the website is that it's a true A-B player. It's playing bit for bit exactly what the artist has handed me. and what I've handed back. So you're just switching between a mastered versus unmastered version. And a lot of the time, depending on how compressed the file is when people send it to me, there's going to be a drastic difference in volume. And so my mastered version is automatically going to sound that much more present and in your face and louder, and everybody's like, whoa, that sounds great. And it's just one of the problems in that to really get a good feeling for what I'm actually doing and how I'm changing things, I always recommend that my artists figure out some way at home to balance those two out. When I send them back my mastered file, I tell them to import it into a new session file and import their original dry file, A/B it just right on top of each other in a track, and balance the volumes on the two so that they're similar in volume, because It's very easy for your ears to get fooled by a difference in volume and say, oh, that louder file sounds better. So it's one of the drawbacks to the way that my site is, but it's very honest. It's showing you this is what they gave me, this is what I gave them back, but obviously mine's going to be a lot louder, and therefore everything's going to sound that much bigger and better. But, it's one of the things that I try to educate people on as well. I love getting quieter files because I have more dynamic range that I can play around with. I mean, the more dynamic range that a mix has, the better that mix is going to sound once it gets mastered. I guarantee it. If somebody sends me a file and the waveforms just look like a sausage, it's just you've got this little tiny trail in and it's just brick walled all the way through the whole thing, and at the end it's just I can't do as much on my end. It limits the ability I have to get into some of my saucy outboard compressors and do some of the things that really let the music pulse. And I highly recommend, it's one of the things that I send people as kind of a general observational tool. If you have meters on your output mix bus, if you have the ability to run a plug-in, or if you have the luxury of an analog meter, it makes things a lot easier. But one of the things I always recommend is shooting for like your average RMS level on your meters to be hanging at negative 20 dBFS to negative 16. So your RMS value is going to be, and if you want to look up RMS, it just means root mean square. It's kind of an average rule for an average volume loudness kind of thing. And your peaks are going to obviously be quite a bit above that, especially if you have things like drums in your music or heavy guitar strums or something like that. You want your peaks to be peaking out no more than negative 3 full scale. So, you want to not be bruising the top. You want to be, especially at 24-bit. If you're working at 24-bit, you have plenty of headroom. Trust me. Each bit there's a whole lot of math behind this, but let me just say each bit represents 6 decibels of dynamic range. So if you're down 6 dB, that means you're still using 23 bits of information. If you're down 12 dB, you're still using 22 bits of information. So you can hang out lower than you used to with 16-bit. So definitely do. When you're mixing, if you can set up a master bus meter and kind of obviously use your ears more than anything. That's the most important thing. But once you get a balanced mix that you like, just check that meter, and if everything's just bruising the top all the time, I recommend going in, and usually with your DAW, there's a way you can either shift-click or some command-click all the different tracks and bring them all down together so they stay relative, and you have more headroom on your master bus. And that's huge. I mean, I can do so much better work for people who have a lower, more balanced dynamic headroom thing. So your average being around negative 16, your full scale peaks being at negative 3, that's a great amount of headroom. I mean, that's what I would love to see from everybody. It's not what I usually get, but it's just my recommendation. You'll find that your mixes sound better when you have that much headroom. So it's just a little point of advice. I mean,
there's some really, really great tips you've given us, Thaddeus. Thanks very much. And one additional one that that relates to that difference in volume is one that Thaddeus passed on to me. Next time you go into a hi-fi shop and you're looking at the high-end speakers, make sure they haven't turned the volume up a little bit on that.
Yeah, that's one of the old skeezy tricks, man. People would go in and turn up just 1.5 dB more, makes that speaker sound so much better to our ears because our ears are so easily fooled by volume difference.
See, not only can the Indie Music Tips help you with mastering, could help you about buying your hi-fi.
Yeah, buy hi-fi speakers from a shady place. You're going to end up spending more money than you need to because they're going to try to sell you the $2,000 more expensive speakers, just by turning it up a little bit and not telling you. Be aware.
Really appreciate your time,
Sure.
Thaddeus. Thanks very much.
Thanks
and
for having me.
hopefully we'll have you back at another date to talk about something else on mastering. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, good luck out there.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.